When it comes to your network, visibility is imperative because you can't secure what you can't see. Riverbed's network performance management solution gives you 100% network visibility 100% of the time. Now you can resolve performance issues and security threats up to 90% faster and reduce response time, damage, and cost spent on remediation and containment efforts. Connect with Riverbed today and learn how their NPM solution can protect your network by visiting securityweekly.com/Riverbed. Workloads protected by VMware are the safest workloads in the multi-cloud. Private cloud, public cloud, any cloud. Stronger, with distributed protection to the API and everything east-west, inside, and cross-cloud. Stronger, with 3 layers of detection, trusting nothing and seeing everything, even the best hidden bad actors. Stronger, with an SE Labs AAA certified advanced NDR that brings the multi-cloud together for the win. You've got workloads, we've got security. VMware Security. Simply stronger. Visit securityweekly.com/VMware to learn more.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. Also, we had an absolute blast putting together this year's Security Weekly Unlocked virtual event. All presentations are now available on demand for your viewing pleasure, and the URL for that one is securityweekly.com/unlocked to register and watch now. All right, and on to the news. If you want to follow along with the notes, the list of stories that we're going to be talking about today, you can go to securityweekly.com/ESW 256 for the news details and all the show notes from the 2 interviews we did today as well. All right. First off, Tyler, I have to thank you for sending me that podcast. I'm subscribed to way too many podcasts, but this podcast, the name of it's All In, is that correct?
Yeah, it's called the All In Podcast, and it is a handful 4 of the just highest end venture capitalists / investors / high tech, high growth kinds of guys that you're going to want to follow. One of the guys on there, Chamath, is basically the guy that built probably a huge portion of the SPACs from last year that we've discussed on this show. Jay Kell is just a big name investor, has done a ton of big deals. These guys have been around the block forever, and if you get the chance to hear what they're talking about on that podcast, it's fun, it's interesting, and you learn a ton every week. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm a junkie for anything Theranos related. I read John Carreyrou's book, Bad Blood. I've watched all the documentaries that have come out. I'm excited for I think there's both a TV series and a movie coming out about it soon.
So just to totally embarrass myself, I don't remember if it was on the episode. So I also am a podcast host of a show called Cyber Therapy, and we had Adrian on our show recently. And it might have been on that show where my co-host brought up Elizabeth, what's her name? Elizabeth Holmes or whatever her name is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I went, I don't know who she is. Like, I was such an ignorant idiot. I didn't put the name together with the scenario of what was going on. I felt so stupid having said that on my own podcast. But yeah, that whole storyline of Theranos is absolutely intriguing, how much fraud and dissent happened there.
Yeah, I mean, it's instructive too. And on that podcast, they went into some really interesting conversations, and it's not just technically interesting because they're going through the mechanics of how investment VC funding works and building a startup, about how all that works, but also you're getting their perspectives. And I think it's always interesting to see, the folks actually managing these funds, and handing out the funding, saying, yeah, this stuff looks just as crazy as us as it does to you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. They were talking about in that particular podcast, they were talking about multiple additional live deals that are going right now, live concerns that are just as fraudulent as that. And they can't really do anything about it. They're like, yep, we saw it. We passed. It's a fraud. And they didn't name the name. They didn't name names though. Yeah. Yeah. They don't do that. They're not going to bury their own business for the sake of a podcast, but.
Right. But, people in the know that know the startups in that space, I'm sure knew exactly who they were talking about.
Oh, I'm sure there's all sorts of inside baseball and handshake, pat each other's back kind of scenarios.
So I learned a few interesting new terms on that one. I learned what a burn multiple was.
Oh my gosh! Burn multiple. Let me interrupt you, Adrian.
Yeah.
Burn multiple was the most important thing I learned on there. Actually, I had never actually thought of that. Yeah, I had never thought of the ratio of your burn rate against your revenue rate, and it never mind, because I could go down. Honest to God, I could go down.
But
a 20-minute
it's not against revenue. That's part of what was interesting. Side of it? The other side of it is new ARR, not existing, but new ARR.
Correct. Net new bookings, right? Because of the negative churn potential, the net revenue retention potential, right? I tend to use those terms interchangeably, and I shouldn't, because bookings is the better term there. But I could go on and on about that, but that's a really cool term that I think I'm going to actually start to look at for my own personal investments.
Yeah, and so really easy to calculate, and the multiples are really easy to follow. And basically, the scale is if you're under 1x, if you're basically keeping your head above water, your burn rate is less than the new business you're bringing in. Which, for a traditional bootstrap business, that sounds like insanity. That's like what you need to not go out of business. But when you've got external funding coming in, when you get access to capital. You can play with that number, and anything over 3x they're saying is very bad. And then in between are varying gray levels of okay. And
yeah. And I think I've mentioned this story before, but I was many years ago was in a analyst event where I heard the CFO of, I think it was Box, pre-IPO, Box.net or Box.com or whatever they were called, talking about how much money they were burning, and they're not profitable, and they have no intention to be profitable. And this was kind of my moment of reckoning, where I was like, well, how can you run a business without ever planning to be profitable? And he said to me, look, I can be profitable anytime I want just by turning down my burn, by turning down how much I spend. And really, when you're talking about building a business like a high growth, high tech startup, you're sacrificing profitability, you're approving burn to increase your growth rate. Right. And that balance that's the ratio that we're talking about burn to top line bookings.
Yeah. And they so other terms I learned, default dead and default alive. So these were it came out of I'm blanking on the guy's name now, but
that was Chamath.
Well, no, like who came up with the default dead and default alive terms was Paul, what's his name? Famous blogger.
Yeah, I don't remember his name either, but we can Google it quickly. But yeah, it's a really cool.
On it. But yeah, default dead, is basically your stereotypical software startup. That's VC funded, where you're prioritizing growth over profitability. And default alive is basically, like if we hit a recession or something like that, you're not going to have too hard of a time surviving it. You've got
traditionally, I've always heard these called high growth, high tech startup versus lifestyle business, right? And it's not, I don't think that's the best way to describe it, but that's traditionally what people say. Oh, it's a lifestyle business. It's profitable. It makes money for the owners, but it's not going to be like a skyrocketing high growth thing that goes to the moon, because to do that, you have to burn hard. But I do like the analogy of default dead versus default alive. I think it's a cleaner way of looking at it.
It's like a strong swimmer versus a weak swimmer. Like big wave comes in, all these are going under. They're not coming back up again. Whereas these guys are gonna, they're gonna survive that wave.
Where's this on our sheet of things that we were going to talk about today? Because this isn't even on here, and we've wasted like a third of this segment.
It's not, but it's I think it's good background for a lot of the conversations we have on here, and some of the conversations we're going to have today, because one of them, I mentioned we can jump down to the the items I labeled drama, the Israeli drama. This Israeli site is just great about. I love these posts. Like, these are go make some popcorn posts. But number 9, number 10. That's part of what they talked about in this podcast, is they're talking about the $10 million ARR startup who's valued as a unicorn. It's like once you get to that unicorn level, your exit options are just so restricted. Like there's no way, even maybe 10% of them are going to have an exit that meets with those expectations.
And that's the difficulty of this thing. I've been saying this for about 6 months publicly. All the stuff that they were saying on the podcast, I believe in it totally. And this conversation we've had multiple times on this show. It's you decrease your potential chance for liquidity, making it very, very difficult. You essentially have to become default alive as a business during that window. Right? During the window before you run out of money, you have to become default alive because you have no exit potential. You have to become profitable. There's no way out except for IPO. And if the IPO markets are not available or well positioned at the time you're ready to go, you're just kind of toast, right? And so I think these companies that are taking in hundreds of millions of dollars on multi-billion-dollar valuations, Wiz being a great example of that, will have to become default alive at some point in the next N number of months, or they're never going to make it to exit because the exit has to be so massive.
And here we have No Name Security, 5 million ARR, is what the rumor is. I don't know if that's probably not official, but somebody probably told somebody and, it's gotten out. $1 billion valuation in a market where most of the conversations around API security is, we're not even sure if this is a market. I chatted to somebody who works for a large identity access management company, like a public company, huge company, default alive, been on the public market for a while, and they came out with their own API security product and they can't sell it.
It's a game of hot potato in the investment world. Okay, so the seed guys get in, they just upsell it to the next round, who upsells it to the next round, who says, hey, all that signaling of all these great investors having done due diligence, it must be a great investment. We're going to pile in at hundreds of millions on billions of valuation. They're not doing their own due diligence. And if you look at, who the smartest guys on the train are in Israel right now? YAU Ventures. And I will tell you why YAU Ventures are the smartest guy on the train, because they're jumping out on the D rounds and the E rounds. They're selling off their shares and saying, hey, I'm not going to hold the hot potato anymore. I'm done with the game. And they're going to be the big winners.
Yeah, and and it goes beyond that. Like that's very smart. But look at each step of the process that they go through, and it's very intentional. It's about as different as you can get from some of these other VCs that you hear. People talking about. When they talk about the companies and the individuals who invested in Theranos, that assumed due diligence was done. And skipped it. And even the ones who do due diligence, they're very intentional about what markets they're going to go into, and how they're going to build those companies and how they're going to market those companies. So and very involved, one of those VCs that's very involved with their portfolio companies at each of those stages. So I think early stage, they're working for those returns. They put in a ton of work. To get those early stage companies off the ground.
Yeah, I would say most do. And so, the way I look at myself as an angel, I go into I put my money into the companies, A, that I believe in, B, that I can help, right? That's what I'm trying to do, to help them, because I'm going to get them to the point where I can get them off the ground and help as much as I can. Sometimes they want it. Sometimes the founders don't want it or don't need it, and I don't have to get involved at that level. But I think the strongest investors that are going to do well are the ones that do their own deep due diligence or help build the business and find ways to get involved intimately, because then there's no way the wool can be pulled over their eyes. They know what's going on inside that business.
So another market,
a certain percentage of the market too, though, that is looking at this as a little bit of a game, because there's a ton of money right now in cybersecurity. And the market's really good, and a lot of these investments are coming in maybe a little easier than they should. Not saying people aren't doing their due diligence, but maybe they're a little more lenient based on the fact that so many companies are getting so much money so early on. Seed rounds look like A round, and it's crazy. So I think there probably are certain investors, a certain segment of the investment world that's just trying to get into the game while it's a hot market before something happens, before there's some sort of reconciliation. And that just makes it worse for the companies that legitimately are trying to grow and make a good product and or IPO or get acquired. But I think whenever there's so much money floating around, you're going to get at least a certain percentage of the market that's thinking, I can use this to my advantage short term and not worry about the long-term consequences. But for those of us who are in security and are planning to stay here for a while, it could have bad implications, and it can certainly have greater economic implications if this market somehow crumbles because of bad business practices.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to crumble in that sense of like the extreme version. What I think will happen is there's going to be a bunch of write-downs in some of these major companies, right? So multi-billion-dollar valuation companies on 5 million over the course of the next, 18 months will eventually need to go back to the well or need to try to figure out how to get new investment at some point, and they're going to have to say, oh, we're going to have to now write this thing down because there's no way I can exit it. $2.5 billion on, let's say I even made it to 20 million or 50 million. I'm still not a $2.5 billion acquisition. So I'm going to have to write it down. And who's going to really hurt here are the employees of the company who came in, on these big valuations, who don't understand how preferences work. And the preferences are going to eat up all the exit capital, and the employees will get nothing for all their effort. They'll get their salaries, but they'll get no financial upside on the stock.
Yeah, and that's not even uncommon now for a lot of companies. Companies are hiring employees, and part of the benefits package is you're getting in early, so you're going to have a great financial future. I know plenty of people who've been promised that, and then they end up with either nothing, or perhaps they're laid off because the company thought it had more money and they didn't actually have any sales, or a lot of things can happen where the employee is definitely the one that's hurt, or in the end, when the company does get acquired or hit IPO, they make, 4 or 5 figures, which is, nobody's going to kick that out of bed. But at the same time, it's not the same as the millions of dollars. I know I've been promised huge amounts when I joined the company. I never believed it. I never believed it, fortunately. But I've had founders tell me, "Oh, this company's, you're gonna make material wealth by working here," and I was always like, "Okay, let's see it." But I think that's already happening. It's just going to get worse for employees. And is that going to hurt the industry in terms of recruiting and retaining really good employees? If employees feel like, I can shuffle around, or I can look for the next better thing, or I can apply my skills in a field where this silliness isn't happening.
Equity, and we'll leave it, I got a couple points and we can leave this topic, but equity will cease to become the driving factor for retaining employees, because people will eventually learn that there's very little upside at this point for a lot of these companies, right? Is that people will just start saying, just give me the bigger salary. I don't, sure, I'll take what equity or whatever you got, but I want the bigger salary, right? So that's point number one. Point number two, I completely just spaced on. Shoot.
I don't know what was in your head. Peach Melba?
Peach Melba's, exactly. No, point number two, I do remember now. If you're an investor, don't worry about the last batch that are overfunded and overcapitalized. Right now is the time to get in on the seeds and A rounds, the early rounds. Because as that great, I'm calling it, because I heard it on the podcast, the great write-down occurs for a lot of these companies over the next 18 months. The ones that are just now taking in a $6, $8, or $10 million A round, which is way too big, that's a gap that can be made up by making a healthy company. These are the ones, as stuff crumbles around them, will come up out of the ashes. So that's what I'm looking for from an investment portfolio standpoint.
Yeah, and just to kind of cap this off, I think the CSPM space definitely looks more real than the API security space, where you got Wiz, Orca, all that. And number 9 here, I really put this on here for the quote, actually in the title. You don't even need to click the link, but this is Nir Zuk, the founder CEO of Palo Alto Networks, saying if Wiz is worth $6 billion, Palo Alto is worth more than $1 trillion. because they have a competing product here. They're already selling it to their mature customer base. I think probably a lot of Palo Alto's Prisma customers are already customers in other areas, and they probably have a better view of what that addressable market looks like. So yeah, again, just like the podcast you sent me, Tyler, we've got a lot of very experienced people shrugging and saying, I don't see how any of this is real.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so let's run through some funding and some acquisitions real quick here. I think the big one, if we only mention one, it's a pretty big deal that Herjavec Group and Fishtech combined. Both pretty big MSSPs and resellers. I haven't dived real deep into that, but of course Gary Fish had Fishnet, and that company was combined with Accuvant, which became Optiv, which was a really big deal. I think mostly handled by Blackstone, if I'm remembering that correctly. And yeah, it's not been that long since Optiv was put together. I want to say that was 2014, maybe. So he's already built another company, and both of them are staying on. Robert Herjavec, who a lot of people know from watching Shark Tank, is going to stay on as CEO of the combined company, and Gary Fish is going to be the chairman of the board.
Yeah, this is super cool to me, and I'm generally not a ProServe / MSSP follower. Like, that's not my area of focus and expertise. But what's exciting to me is the birth of and eventual success of Optiv kind of created a blueprint for these massive MSSP / services style plays and channel style plays. And this is a repeat of what was already a very, very successful process for Gary Fish. And I love what he's attempting to do here. I think there's some huge potential. Couple it with the name of Herjavec, who a lot of people know, which is funny because most people don't understand that he's a cybersecurity guy. Like my mom who watches Shark Tank would have no idea that he's in my field.
He's
right?
just a business guy to them, right? Like Mark Cuban. Yeah. Correct.
So when you connect the brand that comes with Herjavec and a successful company that he's built in Canada, like a very successful company, with the experience of Gary Fish and what he's done with Fishnet / eventually turned Optiv. Holy smokes, this is powerful. This is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a trend we're starting to see is more and more services companies being valued closer to what a software company would. Number one here is, Pentera is, I think this is an Israeli company, but I'm really hoping that name is a portmanteau of pen test and the metal band Pentera, because that would be great.
I 100% always think Pentera when I say that company name. I always think of the metal band.
I'd never heard of them before now, but yeah, $1 billion valuation for a services company, and what we're starting to see. Bishop Fox with their CAST offering, which they've renamed. I can't even remember what they renamed it to. Rebranding is hard.
Product. It's their service product.
Yeah, so they actually, talking about a bootstrap company that took a Series A, like 20 years into the life of the company, to build a product that's backed by services. So more and more, we're seeing almost what I would call like a hybrid software and services company. If you look at Arctic Wolf, the valuations they're getting and the funding they're getting, I think 10 years ago you'd never see that outside a software company. So it's a really interesting trend to watch.
And additionally, if you were to compare the services-based companies to traditional product companies, and then also throw in, say, SaaS product companies, you see the multiple jumps. What's happening with the traditional service-based companies is they're creating SaaS-based products on the back of their services, which are generating one thing that's making them much more valuable and increasing their multiple, and that's recurring revenue and the ability to land and expand their business within a buyer. And so they get what's called negative churn or higher net revenue retention. And that is the fundamentals of what makes a SaaS business such a high multiple business. And so they're turning themselves into SaaS software businesses, and that's why their multiples are going up.
Yep. All right, I'm going to run through some acquisitions here. I think I'm just going to read through all of these, and then we've got 5 of them here. I guess maybe this is like a fiscal year thing where we don't see a whole lot of fundings right now, but we do see a ton of acquisitions. So I'm just going to read through them, and we can pause and talk about any, if any, are individually interesting. But Google acquired SIEMplify, which is a pretty big one, pretty big SOAR offering out there. You know, they're going to take that, combine it with Chronicle, with their SIEM offering. A EU retail giant, Schwartz Group. You know, this is kind of both an acquisition and an investment. You know, they acquired XM Cyber, which is a breach and attack simulation vendor, for $700 million. So very interesting one there. That was the one where I jokingly said a European grocery store bought a cyber company. Flashpoint acquired vulnerability intelligence leader risk-based security. So another bootstrap company here, or I say another, I haven't gotten to the other one yet. But I do think it's interesting that we're seeing a lot of acquisitions and funding for bootstrap companies. I mentioned Bishop Fox. We saw it with 1Password. You know, we're seeing a lot of companies that were bootstrap profitable from day one. You know, all of a sudden getting either grown or acquired by other companies here. And then Recorded Future. This is the other bootstrap company, SecurityTrails, which is an attack surface management company. So they're going to find all your external assets that you've forgotten about. In that space there.
We've got Recorded Future and Flashpoint sort of in the same conversation and going in similar but not quite the same direction.
Yeah, both intelligence. I mean, you can go so many different directions with when you're an intelligence company. You've already got these data pipelines. Vulnerability intelligence, very different from attack surface management, but really kind of go to the same goal. You know, that's in the preparation stage of your security planning and security strategy, making sure you don't have any low-hanging fruit out there.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, Tyler.
Nope. No comment here, boss.
Okay. I thought you were saying something.
Nope. I was on mute, actually. I definitely didn't say anything.
Okay. So just skipping down to I thought it was interesting. U.S. News came out with the. I had completely forgotten that they do this best jobs thing. So this isn't just about how much you're going to get paid. Like, they take stress levels into it apparently, and still somehow security analyst came out number 1 on the list. Wow. You know, I guess security analyst is maybe lower stress than like a SOC analyst or something like that. But I don't think of it as low stress. But
what's interesting on there is that they also have like physician assistant and nurse practitioner. Those are also not low stress jobs. And, you know, as stressful as it gets in security, we're still not literally saving people's lives.
Right.
So yeah, we do in a certain sense, we do bring on our own stress, me included, but it's just an interesting list. And when I read the methodology behind it, and they said, they take into account stress. I'm like, how did any of these industries get on this list if that's the case? And at least security is well paid.
Do you have a snoring animal there, Katie?
I do. Yeah.
That's great.
It's my cat, Gus.
I heard it too. I thought it was like a garage door or something opening.
I was like, why is Tyler humming? Is he trying to speed us along? Or
no, dude, I totally passed out. I was snoring. I'm sorry. I take full ownership of the problem. I will not do it again. I'll be on mute.
This is not the first time a meeting or a video conversation has been disrupted by one of my snoring animals.
Oh, it's not disrupted. It was improved.
Perhaps, yes. I was sucking. Yeah, no, that's Gus. He's an 11-pound cat.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, he's a cat. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was a dog too. Yeah,
I thought it was a cow.
All right, moving on here. I have a quick shout out here because some of the services that make BlackBerries work was shut down. So BlackBerry diehards lost access to the ability to make phone calls, text, like some really fundamental stuff, you need to use one of these. If you're one of those out of my cold dead hands people, yeah.
Adrian, this just in from the news that nobody knew happened. Okay, just saying. On this particular one, nobody on the planet knew it happened.
Yeah, that tree fell in that forest and nobody heard it, right?
Nobody heard that tree, Adrian. Nobody did.
All right, moving on then. So one of the requirements on Windows 11, which I am actually using today, that's what I'm. Skype actually broke before we started this podcast today. So still working through some bugs on Windows 11. I felt like it was time to jump in there. One of the requirements is a TPM, and Microsoft has Pluton, which is their own design TPM chip, I guess. I don't fully understand the technical pieces of it, but yeah, that's a makes a lot of sense. With the TPM required, makes sense for them to be getting into the actual design of it. Apple's been doing that for years. Let's see. Yeah, I think Adrian, we can push a lot of this stuff. We can jump down to the squirrel stories.
I was going to say, Adrian, this might be the perfect time to watch that little rodent on the screen.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we can throw up the squirrels.
There they are. I love them. They make me smile every week.
Lake Superior State University. Apparently they've been doing this since the 70s, but they've been banishing words. Every year they come up with words that are, I guess they feel like, and they've got a rationale for everything they ban. They're dumb, they're annoying, they're tired of it. So that they banned words. And I think each of us have come up with our favorite banned words on this list. Should I start?
Yeah, I was going to say, is this where you want us to talk, or you can give us your first ones?
Yeah. So I think the one I thought was funny was, and I think it was 2007 was pwn or pwned. And I think it was more, we use it a lot in security, to refer to something that's been hacked. But specifically, it was the gaming use of it, where, you antagonize your opponent, but I do think it was funny. It was they banished it that far back because we were certainly still using it in cybersecurity after that.
You know what the worst thing about this is, Adrian? It's not that the list of banned words has certain things in it. It's that I still use them because I'm such an old head. Like,
it hurts you personally?
Yeah, I see this and I'm like, oh, fake news was banned in 2018? Shoot. Get her done. Oh my God, that's been banned 20 years? How am I still using this stuff?
Show us where the banned word list touched you, Tyler.
Yeah, I know. Whatever was on one of my lists, and I use that at least 14 times per day.
Yeah, can't anymore. It's banned.
No. If I start seeing
they also banned LOL, and that is never going away. Nope.
If I start looking through the banned list, I just feel horrible for myself. And I really fully understand why my 17-year-old son makes fun of me every single day for being cringy.
And when was LOL banned?
Child, you should have known this was coming.
I know.
LOL was banned before either of my children, either my teenagers were born. And I'm pretty sure I've used it today.
LOL, you're making me laugh.
More than once today.
Right, we are actually LOLing, so I think it's okay.
I think I LOL'd in our back channel chat 2 seconds ago, so it's fine.
I think about that when I write it. I think, did I laugh? At least a chuckle? If there's at least a chuckle out loud, I'll use it. If not, I won't, because I feel guilty.
You're literal. You're a literalist.
I am.
Yeah,
all right.
Well, been so on the Adrian, list at some point, because everybody uses it incorrectly.
So, Adrian, wait, what? Yeah. That being said, at the end of the day, everything else being fake news, I think we need to get to the last squirrel. And yes, I used 5 banned words in that one sentence.
Wait, what?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was amazing, Tyler. Thank you for that. For that display of oldness.
Hey, I embrace what I am, man. I don't try to hide it anymore. Look, how can I? Okay, I just can't.
So talking about there's ridiculous stuff in cybersecurity where we're like, really, that's a product now. But man, in the world of premium water, Liquid Death, which I don't know if you've seen this on store shelves, it's really easy to find. The whole water aisle is all clear packaging, and theirs is black, and it says Liquid Death on it, and they're cans of water. And they just raised a $75 million round to grow their brand. And it's all about murdering your thirst. It's hilarious. Like, they go to such lengths. The CEO, Mike Cesario, they had one customer who filmed himself, I think posted on Instagram, murdering his thirst every day for 365 days. And as a result of that, the CEO got that customer's face tattooed on his arm.
Whoa.
So like a whole brand built on shock value. Amazing. Absolutely. And it's water. It's canned water.
I really have no comments to talk about that. Like, black colored canned water and murders and tattoos on arms, that's where I draw the line. I am speechless.
So if I could, I would like to bookend this, if we're not making you too late, Tyler, for your next your next thing. It's very short anecdote that I heard listening to the Dropout podcast, which, talking about earlier, I'm kind of obsessed with the whole Theranos story, and I'm binge listening to the Dropout podcast right now. And this came from the Crime and Punishment episode, about 26 minutes into that episode. They're interviewing Roger. I'm trying to remember how to say his name. McNamee. Help me out here, Tyler. You know how to say this guy's
something. Name. Roger McSomething.
McNamee.
Sure, McNamee. Sounds right.
Founding partner of Elevation Partners. Also founded Silver Lake Partners. So I actually don't know the name. Yeah. So. Interesting guy. They interview him a lot on this podcast, and he tells this old joke he heard during the .com bubble before it burst in the 90s. Mom, I just sold the dog for $1 million. What? You sold Sparky? Yeah, for $1 million. $1 million? You don't even have a bank account. Where are you going to put it? Oh, I don't need a bank account. I traded him for $2 $500,000 cats. And he's saying that's Silicon Valley today. That's investment in general today. All right, and with that, hey, I noticed we haven't had a whole lot of reviews of this show on like Apple Podcasts and a lot of the platforms where you would leave a review. So if you enjoyed this episode and you're listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, it would be great if you left one. If you didn't enjoy this episode, you can send me angry tweets. You can jump in my DMs, leave an angry comment. As long as it's tells us what we can fix, we'd appreciate that too. Constructive criticism and feedback is always appreciated. Thanks so much, Tyler and Katie, for joining me today. And thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.